And we're back with another edition of the Pop Culture Cosmos. My name is Gerald Glassford from Pop Culture Cosmos and Game Source. How is everyone out there today? And I'll tell you what, he's back in the saddle once again. It's my good friend, the chairman and CEO of Humanican Media. It's Josh Pederson. What's up, my friend? Glad to have you back.
Hey, I'm glad to be back, man. I missed seeing my face in the lower right-hand corner of my screen while talking pop culture. So it's good to be back, man. Let's what do you got for me tonight?
Well, first off, I want to thank again Rob McCallum from Tiny Titan Games, and also as well director of Nintendo Quest for sitting in for you on Friday's PCC Multiverse. And if you didn't get a chance to check that out, it is available.
Hey, also, congratulations to Mr. Rob McCallum.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. He has just announced that he's expecting with his girlfriend. They are expecting a child in the near future. A beautiful baby girl is on the way, and so we want to wish him all the best for the man who actually invented the name Pop Culture Cosmos. So we are truly excited for them and their family, and we want to wish them all the best on health and happiness with their new child that is en route indeed. And again, thanks to Rob for sitting in on the show. We truly appreciate it. If you want to check that out, that is on the PCC Multiverse. That is available. That is available on the Pop Culture Cosmos channel, available on iTunes, aka Apple Podcasts, and a whole slew of other download and streaming options, which I will mention after the next break, indeed. So, because we want to get into a lot of good stuff here today. But first, since he's back in the saddle with me again, Josh, can you give me an update? What's going to go on this week with the wonderful happenings at Humanican Media?
Yes, there will be a new Super BS Games cast, as well as a new Attack of the Humanicans on Tuesday night on the Podcast Radio Network.
I want to quiz you. What time is it on the Podcast Radio Network?
6 o'clock, 7?
Half right. It is 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific on the Podcast Radio Network.
Yes, what you just said.
Yes, but it is exclusive content for that audience, correct?
Yes, correct. So tune in at 7 o'clock. You'll hear some exclusive Attack of the Humanican. Yeah. All right, cool.
And a lot of good stuff coming up. He's getting back into the groove of things. It's the Attack of the Mannequins on the Podcast Radio Network. Also, the Super BS Gamescast coming everywhere that you can download it and stream it. That's made available, including YouTube, Podbean, Podcast.com, and of course, iTunes, aka Apple Podcasts. So we've got a great show lined up for you today. We've got a great song from Hyperschmidt and a good friend of Hyperschmidt coming as well, and I'll announce that in a little bit. And also as well, we're going to be talking some Stephen King, some influences that my good friend here has as being a world-renowned author that he is already, and a lot more books coming on the way as well. And also, we may talk a little bit more about some video gaming, including what's going on with these retro flashbacks and what's up with that as far as all the negative vibes that are coming out. We'll talk about a little bit more about that in detail coming up later in the program. But first, it was kind of a mixed bag here at the box office this weekend, wasn't it, Josh?
Yes. I'm sorry, I've been out of the loop here.
Yes, it was a mixed bag at the box office this weekend, with a close race with last week's champ Dunkirk, and also as well the Emoji movie, battling neck and neck as far as which one will win out the weekend. Third place will be Girls Trip, and then fourth place will be Atomic Blonde. Atomic Blonde is going to probably earn somewhere in the neighborhood of 17 to 18 million domestically, which is a little below what studio estimates were saying, which is going to be right around the 20 mark. Now, obviously, the movie didn't cost that much, so it's not going to be a big loss or big red ticket if it doesn't meet up to the $30 million budget. But I ask you, with all the interesting hype going in with Charlize Theron, and I've seen quite a bit of the action that's gone on in the movie, and it seems like it really, from that point of view, it seemed like a really killer type movie, and something that definitely it places on my list as something that's, you know, an interesting to see type film. But it doesn't look like it has resonated with audiences, so much so that the cinema score, which is looks like into a it looks like it's going to be around a B, is not exactly the one that you're going to need to have if you want to keep legs week after week or week after star as far as word of mouth is concerned. So I ask you, Josh, is there a future for Atomic Blonde, maybe an Atomic Blonde 2, or is this something that's going to be a one and done, and Charlize Theron as an action movie star may be something that may not come to pass?
To be completely honest, I didn't see it doing good numbers in the first place. I think they were trying to cash in on the success of John Wick, maybe throw a female into the role and see what happened.
Well, one of the original John Wick's directors is the director on this film.
Yeah, and I know they said they're talking something about maybe crossing them two over eventually, but I honestly, like, it's just one of those movies, like, even done with, I know, female.
Well, that would be hard to do. I want to say the first off, but that would be hard to do because Atomic Blonde is set in the Cold War.
Yeah, exactly. But I know that they're trying to do this whole thing with, like, female actresses, and that's awesome. That's great. But I mean, even when such movies have been made in the past, like The Transporter, with like a male in the main role, a Transporter, or Shoot 'Em Up with Clive Owen, it still hasn't done that well. I don't think there's as big a market for over-the-top action movies as there once was. I think John Wick got lucky in the way that it was perceived by audiences, and maybe Atomic Blonde will pick up, as it hits digital and Blu-ray and all that, and it just needs more.
Well, I think if I may interrupt, I'm sorry. I think it's world building. Do you think it's a situation where world building it comes into play? Because I think with John Wick and also Kingsman, the worlds that they built seemed very interesting to the fan outside of the action. Is that correct?
Right. Now it just and these numbers we're seeing right now, they might not mean anything. I mean, if they were to continue to push forward, as long as it ends up turning a profit, it might just take a little bit of time for it to build momentum. Like, I know at first, like you were mentioning with Kingsman and John Wick, like, no, those movies at first, they weren't really that well received, and then people eventually started looking at them the same way that they look at, like, Boondock Saints now. Like, that movie hardly made anything when it hit theaters, and then as it hit Blu-ray and it started coming out in their T-shirts and whatnot, people got more into it. So who knows? I mean, I hope that it succeeds. I want to see it, but not bad enough to go, pay for it. So maybe I'm one of those people who will give it more momentum as it hits, as it comes out, and I can watch it from my couch or something.
I agree with you. I think it might turn out to be one of those cult hits that 5-7 years down the line will be more fondly remembered. And there's been quite a few movies that didn't succeed at the box office and disappointed, and have gained substantial life within the home video market, whether it was VHS, whether it was Laserdisc, whether it was DVD, whether it was Blu-ray, and now whether it was 4K Ultra HD. So definitely Atomic Blonde could gain a new life, especially because the intense action scenes, which from all appearances seem to be the core of the film and why the film is getting any notoriety at all. And when I say that, there's a movie coming out in early October, Blade Runner 2049. And why is that coming out? Why is that a thing? And why is that, happening at all? It's because Blade Runner, the original, found a new life after its initial theatrical run, because its theatrical run did not turn out to be a money-making venture for all parties concerned. So definitely that's something to be aware of. And with John Wick, you're absolutely right. John Wick was made on a small budget, the original one, and definitely it caught word of mouth later on. It just kept getting stronger and stronger with word of mouth. And Kingsman, like you said, it was this funny, quirky British movie that, people were not really ready to understand at first, maybe, but somehow it gained a lot of great word of mouth, and I caught it on home videos, and I absolutely love it, and I'm waiting to see what will happen in the next movie coming out in September. So I can't wait for that indeed as well. And that was something for me that hit on home video, because I never really had an interest to see it at the theaters at the time. But boy, it swung me in a complete different direction indeed, and complete different direction. So I'm definitely looking forward to both the new Blade Runner coming out and the new Kingsman movie coming out. And I'm hoping that Atomic Blonde will find a new life once it hits the home video market. And let's hope that it will gain an audience, and maybe you and I will better appreciate it come the end of this year when it hits that home video market at this point, at that point in time. But there's an even more serious question I got to ask you when it comes to this weekend's box office: is how in the world did the Emoji movie do as well as it did? And do you, or does this now seem like it's going to spark a continued line of movies in this type of realm and this type of platform? Because Emoji Movie, from all appearances, was a critical failure of massive form. It will probably be on many people's and many critics and many general audiences' worst of 2017. So I ask you, how has the Emoji Movie prevailed against such starkly negative odds?
I was actually thinking about that earlier today because I read something that Dunkirk had barely outrun the Emoji Movie at the box office. And
but you never know. By Monday morning, it could be vice versa. Sometimes that flips if it's a close race.
Right, and honestly, the only explanation that I can come up with personally is that it's summer and kids want to go to the movies, and parents want to take their kids to see something, and either that or the fact that we are so in love with emojis and text messaging and stuff that we will literally go watch anything that has some sort of relevance to our own obsessions inside of it, in which case that is actually very sad. But yeah, my only explanation for that is that kids are wanting to go to the movies and see something, because there's not a lot of kids movies out. I don't think there's any kids movies out right now.
Not really. Despicable Me 3 was the last one, and The Nut Job 2, which again, I have no idea how that became a thing when the original did not do so well at all. I think it was that
was with Bruce Willis, right? He played the squirrel or something.
I think so. I'll have to look it up real quick, but I mean, that movie did not perform very well to my memory in the box office, and I'll take a look at that in a sec to make sure. But that was just how that's a thing, I don't even know either. But maybe they're very inexpensively made, so maybe they translate well overseas. There's a lot of other factors there. But the Emoji Movie, maybe it's just people that just like to hear Patrick Stewart talking some poop. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, the things that we find to be novel things these days are actually very they're not really even funny anymore. They're just kind of, you look at it, from my perspective and probably your perspective, we look at it and be like, that is just stupid. But to somebody 10 years, 10, 20 years younger than us, that's the funniest thing I've ever seen. So it's literally a different generation thing. That's the only way I can think to describe it.
I know one of my daughters wants to actually see it, so I'm gonna have to sit through it, and I'll let you know how much of an event it is. And by the way, The Nut Job, actually, I was correct. It was for an animated movie, a relatively low-priced movie, costing around $40 million to make, and worldwide it did over 120. So it fits that golden rule, 3 times the actual budget of what it makes for a decently a decent chance for another one. So it looks like that's why the Nut Job 2 exists, and why it's a thing that's coming in a few weeks. I'll be sure to line up for that one. I can't wait. But It's amazing how the Emoji Movie has performed at the box office, and seeing how even if it does 25 million, 27 million dollars the box office, and ends its theatrical run somewhere at a 50 to 75 million, it's just amazing how that part of pop culture has struck so much of a nerve with audiences that no matter how bad the film apparently is on the surface, and no matter what reviews, some movies, I guess they'd say, like you say, some movies are actually review proof, and it looks like the Emoji Movie is the case. So definitely got to shake my head on that one. But hey, if audiences, that's what they choose, they wanted to go see this weekend, so be it. Indeed. What are your thoughts on the Emoji Movie and also Atomic Blonde? Do you think both should get a sequel? Do you think one should get a sequel? Do you think both are just full of dookie? Uh, dookie, as they say in Emoji Land, I guess. Share us your thoughts. PopCultureCosmos at yahoo.com. Also, as well, Pop Culture Cosmos, Humanica Media, and Game Source on Facebook and Twitter as well. We've got a great show lined up for you, and just awesome hour indeed, all set up for you. But first, we want to go ahead and play a song for you from our good friend Chad and Hyperschmidt. He's along with his, I guess, compatriot on this song, is his good friend Trudier. Is that correct?
Yeah, Trudie, who is also he's Travis. He's been on the Morning Monitor and a few other.
Well, there you go, Travis. In fact, I play his actual promos every now and then as well. So it's Hyperschmidt and Trudie. This is a cover of the 21 Pilots song "Goner," and this is the Pop Culture Cosmos Show. And we're back with Pop Culture Cosmos. My name is Gerald Glassford from Pop Culture Cosmos and Game Source. We truly appreciate you being part of the broadcast here today. If you cannot catch us on the Podcast Radio Network, where we've been number one 5 months in a row, and it's all because of you, and we truly appreciate it, you can catch our shows on the download on the following entities: iTunes, aka Apple Podcasts, of course. And if you do, please subscribe to us, rate us, and like us there, or review us, or whatever you need to do on there, because we truly appreciate it. And if you subscribe to us, the Monday and Friday shows hit right there for you, so it's ready to download indeed. Also available on TuneIn, the Ace Podcast Network, Overcast.fm, Player.fm, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, Podcast.com, Mixcloud, the ESO Network, the Tangibound Network, and the Gonna Geek Network as well. And if you do download or stream our shows on those platforms, you get bonus material, whether it's a podcast, whether it's an interview. You always get bonus material. So it's like a 2-for-1 thing for absolutely nothing. It's absolutely free. And it's our way of saying thank you for listening in on the Pop Culture Cosmos channel with either the Pop Culture Cosmos Show or the PCC Multiverse. So Josh, I know that's got to be my tagline here. So Josh, tell me a little bit about Stephen King as far as an influence in your writing and influence in you. Are you a good fan of Stephen King books and novels and stories? He's written everything from small to large stories, so he's covered the whole gambit of the writing landscape.
Yeah, sorry, hold on 1 second. Oh, all right. Yeah, I'm a pretty big fan of Stephen King. Let's see, my bookshelf back here has quite a few novels by him. But so yeah, one of the first major book series I got into was The Dark Tower, and then I read. Right now, I'm currently reading It because I had never picked up that novel before. But I've read some of his other stuff. I read which I for some reason cannot name right now, so I'll have to get back to you on that. But
do you think that what's often thrown out there? I mean, because he's now getting up there in age, and there is there is the mortality issue. But even for him, do you think he's the greatest American author ever?
See, that's tough for me because he has his own style. It's like it's hard to say like he's the best at what he does when there are so many other authors out there that do the same thing, but maybe just don't have the same amount of publicity he had. So it's hard for me to say he's the best when I haven't read, you know, enough horror novels or mystery or suspense novels to fully say that. Because like I like Dean Koontz. Like I would probably much rather read a Dean Koontz book than a Stephen King book, but Stephen King has certain stories that I find more appealing than many Dean Koontz novels. Like I love the Odd Thomas series by Dean Koontz, but if you asked me to read a horror movie or a horror book between Dean Koontz and Stephen King, I would probably read Stephen King. So it just depends on like what the story is, what the content is. I know he is. I would definitely call him a great author. And he's excellent at what he does because he's the standard like when it comes to American literature, I guess. So you could compare him to like you know, Dan Brown of Da Vinci Code or Dean Koontz or you know, there's several other writers out there of that caliber, but when you think of someone who writes books, obviously Stephen King comes to mind just because he's such a big name. So yeah, I mean, I guess you could call him, he's not the standard that I compare books to, but I guess he is the standard that most compare books and authors to.
Well, I again, there's stuff that I do like from him that I've read over the years, and stuff I'm not, you know, as keen on. I recently read Mr. Mercedes earlier this year, and I'll get more into that, why that's relevant coming up here in a bit. But what I think sets him apart is his versatility, and that he's written in so many different fashions, from so many different genres. And obviously that's upcoming here in the next few weeks because there's 3 different types of movies coming that are adaptations of his work into 3 different genres, from fantasy, action, and adventure with The Dark Tower to more of a horror theme and more of a horror slice with the remake of It. And then also as well a thriller with, you know, a little bit not actually really horror into it, but really much like a thriller investigation story with Mr. Mercedes. So to me, that's where I think he stands out, is the fact that he's been all across the board. And maybe he hasn't written at a peak level in all those genres, but the fact he's been able to succeed with best-selling books and winning books in all across those platforms make him, at least like you said, someone to think about when it comes to the upper echelon of American authors. Your thoughts?
Right. No, I definitely agree. And the numbers are probably there to support that claim. But he's, and yes, he spans across certain genres, but they're just like, there's some titles that I've picked up by Stephen King and I started and I'm like, I'm really just not into this at all. So it all depends. Yeah, he definitely, I would say he's up there, but you know, it's interesting because we were talking about like It and The Dark Tower and how he spans genres. I know we've talked about this before, but The Dark Tower, I don't know if you've read the entire series of books, but that is actually the axis on which all of his other stories turn. So like if you read The Dark Tower, it talks about how the Dark Tower is basically what holds all the worlds together, and all the creatures that have been in his other books, like The Stand and It and Cujo and what's the one with the car called? I can't remember.
Oh, Christine?
Christine, yeah, and Carrie and
Christine actually makes appearance in Ready Player One, just to let you know.
Yeah, I was reading that. But like all of these creatures that inhabit his books, they exist because the Dark Tower is failing. It's an interesting theme because it pretty much is a joint universe.
Well, that's very interesting. I kind of really dig that that's the case. Where would Mr. Mercedes fit into that line? I know you said you had the book. I've actually read the book this year, and it is coming. Amazing enough, Mr. Mercedes, which of the 3 movies will be the least publicized and will be the least viewed because it's on the Audience Network, but it is a several-day event, I believe, and it is a mini series for all intents and purposes, but it looks like it's going to try to somewhat faithfully recreate that type of movie and that type of thriller with Brendan Gleeson in the title role. So he's always been a favorite actor of many, including myself. So I think he'll play the role very admirably. and I really liked what's going to be set up there. I just wish it was on a larger platform than the Audience Network, which for DirecTV users is great because it's accessible there, but for many other outlets and whatnot, it's just not going to be able to get it until it hits home theater or some other venue, some other platform like Netflix, Hulu, and whatnot. But who knows when that will happen.
He has a show on Hulu as well, right? It's about John F. Kennedy and some like time travel or something. If I remember.
Is that the one with James Franco?
Yeah. I don't know if that's still on, but
something 68. It's based off a date.
Yeah,
based off the date.
Date of Kennedy's death, I think, is what it was.
Yes, that's correct. So it's that one. He's got so much out there that seems translatable to a modern audience, to a television audience. So that's another just great platform for his work, is that so much gets translated onto the screen. Obviously, Shawshank Redemption should be, when you talk about his adaptation of his work, obviously that leads the way as far as the finest that's been out there. And the original It, a lot of people have great fondness for. I've watched it on more than one occasion. I think it's okay. I think it's actually pretty good when I watched it back then. When I watched it in recent years, it hasn't held up as well, obviously, because for the time frame it was made. So I'm looking forward to this It reboot, bringing a new type of Pennywise to the screen. Have you had a chance to see the previous It movie, and what are your thoughts on it as the new reboot comes very much closer to audiences?
Okay, I gotta be honest, I have not seen the old It movie.
Shame on you.
I know. I've always debated it, and because clowns, I'm terrified by clowns. Okay, like I'm currently reading the book.
That's the idea.
Yeah, no, I know, but I'm currently reading the book, and it's like this thick, and I look at the cover, and I have to put the cover face down because it freaking terrifies me. But I'm hoping when I get to the end of it, then I'll be like, I'll know how it resolves itself, so I'll be brave enough to go see the movie. And
it was really hard to get. I mean, if you watch the 80s version of it, it's not going to scare you. It's not going to give you nightmares, because there's only two real scenes, from what my memory is, in the whole thing, that even would be considered mild in these days and ages. But I am really, really intrigued to see this new It movie coming very soon, and the advantages they'll take of the modern movie forum at large, and see what they're going to do with Pennywise there, because I heard it is really scary, and I've seen some of the trailers, and it really is looks like it's going to send some shivers down people's spines, so to speak. So it's okay to see the 80s version of it. So
all right, well, I'll consider that, because I'm reading the book right now, and I'm maybe about halfway through. But how do you think
it's very timid by today's standards?
Okay, all right, because the book is pretty graphic as it is. So I'm like, we'll see.
It was on ABC. I'll get you the year on it, but it was on ABC, for goodness sakes, in the late 80s, early 90s. Give me a break, man.
How do you think they're going to handle the the Pennywise properties that are going to be seen in the Dark Tower? How do you think that's going to be handled, as far as studios sharing rights and whatnot? Do you think there's a contract clause in there somewhere that allowed them to do that? Because I know a big thing in It is something about the turtle, and the turtle is actually a huge part of the resolution of the Dark Tower. So how do you think that's going to go down, as far as studios?
Well, I think in this case, I think if it gets Stephen King's blessing, and if he comes out openly and in the public strongly for the picture, because he knows of the three movies, he has to get behind the Dark Tower the most, because that's the biggest production of the three. That's the one where there could be the most potential loss and the highest of gains, if I'm not mistaken, correct, of all three of platforms, because it is coming to Netflix, correct?
No, It is coming to movie theaters.
Oh, it is coming to theaters as well. Okay. The way it's been presented, it hasn't been presented like in the theaters, as far as it's been rated.
No, yeah, so it's coming to theaters September 8th, and it is being produced by Warner Brothers, and The Dark Tower is being produced by Sony.
Okay.
So that's
Okay.
why I was asking, like, how do you think? Because there are parts in The Dark Tower that are vital to the story, and I saw it in the trailer too that says Pennywise. It's like vital to moving the Dark Tower forward. So it's that's
Well,
why.
I think in this case they obviously, you know, they if Stephen King wanted them to do that and make sure that was emphasized, then I think that both studios were like, okay, you got to do it. You got to do it because this is Stephen King property. And all it takes is just one tweet or one interview bad mouthing both studios on it for both of them to tank. And you don't want that to happen. Now, as far as if you enlighten me on the structure of how it's being laid out as far as for audiences with both being theatrical films, this plays in beautifully with The Dark Tower coming first, leading you hints and giving you hints of Pennywise within that realm so that people will be actually intrigued to go see it even more almost virtually 1 month later, correct?
Right. So if you see in the trailer for The Dark Tower, they do have like the place where Pennywise came from. There's like a mention of the name on a sign and stuff. So and then you can go see it a month later, and I'm excited to see like this cross studio cooperation because I know there's talk back when Spider-Man came out. They're talking about Marvel gave their blessing to have Oscorp or something in the middle of the city. So it's yeah, it's going to be interesting to go further down the line because I know there are a lot of Stephen King properties across a lot of different studios. So I'm just curious how they're going to handle all that. But I guess like if Stephen King is, if he's in charge of a lot of this stuff or they're wanting his blessing on a lot of this stuff, they're going to have to, make some exceptions.
They are going to have to play ball because it's not like a deal where you have Fox and the X-Men, Fox and the Fantastic Four, where they can play ball without Marvel, essentially, and essentially build their own universe without their blessing, whatnot, because they signed the contracts that have been sitting there for years. So that's something we've talked about on numerous occasions. But when it comes to Stephen King movies and the Stephen King universe, ultimately you have to talk to him and get his blessing on it. And if you don't have that, like I said, Josh, all you have to do is one tweet. That's all it takes, and that could severely financially impact a theatrical film release.
Right. So yeah, we're in the age of social media, so that stuff is entirely possible. It's funny because
He knows that, and he definitely, believe me, Stephen King is very up on what's going on in today's world.
Yeah, I know. It's funny too because in It, the book, there's actually a line where he's talking about how he wishes a story could just be a story, no politics or anything. But he's on like Twitter and stuff, putting out political tweets. So there's just a lot. It's a lot of stuff changes with the times. I'll bet. Back when Langoliers came out, it wasn't the same, or Dreamcatcher probably wasn't the same story. But nowadays, Stephen King's become such a big name, and a lot of people want to adapt his books that they're kind of they got to make an exception, man. Got to keep Stephen King happy.
Exactly. But I can't wait for that Misery reboot to happen because it probably will at some point in time. Did you at least see Misery?
Yeah, I always make jokes about Misery and nobody ever knows what it's from. I'm like, like Misery, and they're like, what? I'm like, where guy gets his legs broken because the lady wasn't in the right.
I'm sorry. That's one of the few times on screen where I've actually just winced in as far as when I saw that, because I was not expecting that in least. And Kathy Baker, that's where she's relevant today still, and that's it emanated from that performance. So that's I thought it moved when I watched it, especially the first half was really slow, but man. As soon as that leg breaking happened, it was all bets are off from there. Just oh my gosh! So, but that was back when it was still a good picture. But I bet you money that Hollywood's going to reboot that as either a TV movie or Netflix film or something of that nature. I bet you money it's going to happen. Not that I want it to happen, but I bet you it will.
$4 at Walmart. You can pick up the DVD if you want to.
No, it's okay. I've seen it once. I've seen it enough. But so what are your thoughts out there, everyone, on the Stephen King films that are coming up? That's Mr. Mercedes. Excuse me, that's Mr. Mercedes on the Audience Network. I hope you get a chance to check that out, or if it comes by to a downloading or home video option, I hope you get a chance to check that out because I really liked the story. Didn't think it was super, but I thought it was really strong. And then also as well, you've got The Dark Tower, which is coming later on this week, I believe, August 4th. We're going to talk more about that on the PCC Multiverse. And then also as well, Stephen King's It, which Josh has enlightened me is coming to theaters early in September. Share us your thoughts, popculturecosmos@yahoo.com. Also as well, Pop Culture Cosmos, Humanity Media, and Game Source on Facebook and Twitter as well. You can send us a message and share us your thoughts, and we'll elaborate on Stephen King and all the good stuff that's coming out from him and all the good stuff that you might have liked in the past. We'll just elaborate on the show for you as well. And we're back with the Pop Culture Cosmos. My name is Gerald Glassford from Pop Culture Cosmos and Game Source. We're back for more with the show. And Josh, just wanted to ask you, because you've got so many things going in the fire, obviously a great podcast, but you also got some books that actually Rob and I plugged on our PCC Multiverse that Rob pointed out that you had coming coming on the way. What are those titles of those books again?
Congratulations, You Suck, and The Conjurer's Daughter.
Yes, absolutely. There's some great books coming out. You've already finished The Conjurer's Daughter, correct? That was something you previously did, and you're now bringing it to life as a full-fledged novel coming out, correct?
Yeah, so that's one I found on my computer. I wrote that shortly after Vendetta Dark. I just kind of forgot about it, and so I went back to it. I'm trying to fix it up a little bit. I like to think that I've gotten a little better at the craft since I wrote it, so I'm trying to go in and clean up all the little extra pieces.
Well, can you share what it's about that people might get more, influenced by what The Conjurer's Daughter is all about? Get a little bit of an idea.
Yeah. So there's this. It's hard to go into without giving you all the backstory. I don't want to spoil anything, but so this lady is being stalked by a person who she knows to be dead, and so she seeks out the help of this guy who he has previously been in a psychiatric hospital, but now he's out, and he kind of, I guess you could say, dabbles in paranormal stuff, and so she seeks his help to kind of solve the mystery of this I guess ghost figure who's been stalking her and it turns out that it's actually a mystery that's connected to the town that they live in, and there's a big secret that's been being kept for a long time, and it's sort of tied to his past as well. So there's a lot to go on. I'm gonna release a synopsis later, but I'm having a hard time explaining it right now. But I
already know who should do the movie adaptation. Stellan Skarsgård.
There we go. But yeah, no, it's connected to the world of Vendetta Dark, so I hope that gets people excited.
And it was obviously a great initial entry. Vendetta Dark was, and with The Conjurer's Daughter, and also Congratulations, You Suck, which still qualifies as one of the top 10 best names for a book ever. That when both of those come out very soon to readers out there, they can get a good idea of what's going on with Josh's world and the world that started with Vendetta Dark. But I want to ask you, as an author, what are some of the book influences that you take from over the years that you can apply or you do apply to your writing?
Yeah, so I do this thing where I can go into Barnes and Noble and I just spend hours reading the first pages of books, and that's kind of I take notes on them and I see how other authors do it, like best-selling authors, see what their tactics are and all that. So I've read a lot of Jonathan Tropper, who wrote the movie, or he wrote the book that This Is Where I Leave You, or no, what was that movie with the funeral? This is where I leave you, I think. with okay, with Adam Driver in it and other people. But yeah, so he wrote that book, and he has a whole bunch of other books. One of them is called How to Talk to a Widower. I definitely recommend it because that influenced a lot of my own writing. And then there's Ben Brooks, who's a British. He's from Britain, and he's wrote his first novel at the age of 16, so he's kind of a prodigy. But and then as far as like The Conjurer's Daughter goes, there's a lot of there's a couple mystery writers that I kind of was influenced by. So you have like Paul Doiron, who wrote The Poacher's Son. It was a Edgar Award finalist back in 2012, I want to say. And yes, I did take some stuff from Dean Koontz and Stephen King, just kind of as far as they're good at shaping suspense, and that was kind of what I was going for in this book. But I like to think that I put kind of my own style into it as well, because The Conjurer's Daughter is in first person, whereas like Vendetta Dark was third person. So I'm just trying some new styles with this. But yeah, those are my three major influences: were Jonathan Tropper, Ben Brooks, Paul Doiron, and Stephen King and Dean Koontz. So those are kind of shaped my love of writing novels.
How about the infamous Joe Cool?
Who?
Joe Cool, Snoopy. When he writes, it was a dark and stormy night. When he writes. Sorry, I had to say that. That was setting you up for that one. Sorry. Typing it. Yeah, because you see it when you watch the Peanut. I'm sorry. I'm going in the Wayback Machine now. When you watch the Peanut specials and you see Snoopy sitting on top of his doghouse with the typewriter, it was a dark and stormy night.
Okay. All right. I get it.
And it's ... Then never anything else, but that's okay. It usually goes to like a flashback scene, or in the Snoopy movie, in the Peanuts movie, I think it did that too as well. So.
You also have to remember that most of the dialogue in the Peanuts is wah 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 wah.
Yes. Although the Peanuts movie, I think, is highly underrated, and if you get a chance to see it, the one that came out in recent times, I think what 2-3 years ago. That one, definitely should see that, along with the Muppets movie as well. But that's for another day. We'll talk about some movies that you really should get into on another episode. So definitely we'll save that for another rainy day indeed. A dark and stormy night. How about that? Save that for a dark and stormy night. So we have said some of our influences. My influences when I write, I take a lot from a lot of science fiction novels, some of the Mass Effects, Halos, Gears of War, what I've read over the period of time. I read a lot of autobiographies in the past. That's what so it really can't get writing from there per se, influences from there per se. For me, it's more what I take from fantasy writing and whatnot. You could take a little bit of that sometimes when you're doing your reviews or when you're doing your articles, but I've taken a lot of influence from modern article writers, I guess, probably that. I sometimes borrow little bits and pieces from them to make my own type of reviews and articles when I go ahead and write for popculturecosmos.wordpress.com. I haven't undertaken an adventure like yours in quite some time. I think I wrote a screenplay, back about 15 years ago, 17 years ago. But yeah, that's outside of that, I really haven't undertaken the big step as far as a novel, so to speak, as of yet. Maybe someday I'll have to sit down and do so. But as you always say, it's just time, man. It's just finding the time.
Yes, time.
Yes, if only time could stand still. But
a lot of writers I know stay up. They'll start writing at like 10 p.m. and go till 2 or 3 in the morning. I'm like, that sounds exhausting.
I do that just for editing this show, but we won't go there. What are some of your influences when you read, and some of the books that you like reading, and some of the good suggestions you might have for our audience? We all know that the Wine, Women, and Words podcast, which comes out regularly every Thursday, they always have some great suggestions on books. But what do you like to read out there? What are some of the great books that you've enjoyed, and what are some of the books that you think would be great for our audience to check out? Share us your thoughts, popculturecosmos@yahoo.com. Also as well, Pop Culture Cosmos, Game Source, and Humanica Media on Facebook and Twitter as well. When we come back, we're going to close out the show, and we're going to close out with some talk on some video games and also some retro video game units. This is the Pop Culture Cosmos. And we're back with the Pop Culture Cosmos. This is Gerald Glassford from Pop Culture Cosmos. I'm here along with my good friend, Mr. Josh Pederson of Humanica Media. And before we head on out and talk about our last great subject of the evening, Josh, can you share what's going on this week with everything wonderful at Humanica Media?
Super BS Games Cast. We're going to be recording a new one, and you can check out a brand new episode tomorrow, assuming the podcast server goes back online. Yeah, and also tune in Tuesday night at 7 p.m. for Attack of the Humanicans and catch some exclusive content. Hopefully, I mean, if I'm kind of just getting home today, so I'm hoping I can record something for you. But if not, there will definitely be some content for you. It might not be new, but starting next week, there'll definitely be new episodes going forward. So, yeah, check it out.
That sounds great. I can't wait to see some more great stuff from Humanica Media, and it all starts tomorrow. That's Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific on the Podcast Radio Network. So, Josh, I know you are a huge video game fan like I am, obviously being a part, 1/3 of the Super BS Games Cast that you are. You really like gaming as much as I do, and someone who does go back a long ways with video game systems. Did you get a chance to play over the course of your life any time with either the Atari 2600, which may be a little bit too old for you, but it wasn't for me because I've had one, or the Sega Genesis?
Not the Atari, but yes, to Sega Genesis.
How was that an experience for you?
Yeah, I loved it. That was my first foray into video games. All my friends were playing Nintendo. I got the Sega Genesis, and I was like, I got something you don't have. So there's that. But yeah, I grew up on those games, and I remember, it's funny because I saw a meme the other day, like it said, if you were born in the 90s, you remember how frustrating this game was. And there's a picture of the Lion King on Sega Genesis. I was like, true story, man. True freaking story.
So with all that in there, as far as your experience and obviously mine from playing both the Sega Genesis and also having an Atari 2600, I guess what we've seen this wave of nostalgia come back into video game with a lot of re-releases, and obviously the big success of the NES system, the mini console that came out last year from Nintendo, which unfortunately was discontinued even with such a huge demand on the actual system, so much so that they now have in pre-order, if you can try and get it pre-ordered, the Super NES mini system coming later this year from Nintendo as well. And that type of success has led to many others trying to recreate that same type of nostalgia. And I believe At Games is coming out with a latest version, because I've had previous versions of both the Atari Flashback and also as well the Sega Genesis Flashback systems. The Atari Flashback system hasn't really made any headway either which way. I know a lot of people have indicated to me that they're thinking about getting this latest version because of some of the titles it has. It's well over 100, and that's very, very good as far as that type of value for $79.99. But I know some people have talked about trying to get Pitfall or Kaboom, which is really the title that a lot of people have mentioned to me as far as what they were interested in getting. But when it comes to the Sega Genesis Flashback, that seems to be a much bigger problem with all the advanced reviews and all the box openings this week. And it's not getting the kind of interest that At Games, who actually have recreated the Sega Genesis system, somewhat faithfully, and then also as well provided, wireless controllers instead of the usual wired ones. Problem is, yes, it does come with 85 pre-installed games to play, many of which are Sega Genesis games, but the choices on a lot of them, as I'm sure you've been able to see a little bit of the list there, Josh, a lot of them were never even meant for the Sega Genesis. A lot of them were never even made for the Sega Genesis, and a lot of them are just appear to be just add-ons for the sake of add-ons just to get the number higher. So I ask you, Josh, why the misfire on producing something like that, and didn't at Games think that they were going to get away with something like that, and didn't they think better about instead of just going and doing what they did with the Sega Genesis flashback, just coming out with something a little bit better, more substantial, and having a full line of Sega Genesis games that people could actually be interested in playing?
I think that a lot of like the adware we're seeing is probably developers coming to them and saying, hey, we'll give you, we'll pay you a certain amount of money if you put our products onto your console. I think that as we sit there and play it, we'll be able to tell the difference between them. But yeah, I don't know like why they're doing that way. I always liked At Games because like as far as I have one of their old Sega Genesis here and I can put cartridges inside of it. So, it's, I guess it depends on what, I don't know like what they were expecting. Like they should, as far as like how they determine what games are going to go on their system or what games people actually want to play. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the thought process behind that was. So what do you think is going on?
Well, first of all, it does read cartridges, like you said, but I heard it doesn't do it all that well. Very slow to load, whatnot. But then again, if you were in that era, everything was slow to load at that point in time. So that part of it's not really that much of a big deal, or should be, because well, yes, it should be a big deal because now we're in 2017 and these systems should go a little faster. But what can you say about that? I have an issue with the fact that for $79.99, you're asking a lot of people to be interested in the system with 85 games, which, yes, is a substantial number more than the NES system that came out. But all those were games that came out of the NES system were quality games that people wanted or people had desired or played at some point in time for the Nintendo Entertainment System. When you've got a lot of junkware that's put on and added on just to beef up the number, that's very disappointing. And once you get past some of the Mortal Kombats, some of the Phantasy Stars, and some of the Sonics that are on there, what else you have from what I've seen on the title list is just not that appealing at all. And there were so many monumental games that came out on the Sega Genesis system. For instance, where did the first Madden come from? Sega Genesis. And there's so many other games that were available for the Sega Genesis that were really, truly awesome games to play and helped the Sega Genesis stand out. And almost, when it was almost a somewhat even fight between Sega and Nintendo, with a lot of people going, at each other, which they thought was better, similar to what goes on today with PS4, Nintendo Switch, and also Xbox One. So I ask you, Josh, if you were at Games and you said, hey, let's bump up the price a little bit to $99.99, but get quality, actual Genesis games, which ones would you have included that are not included on this current platform?
Ooh, that's a tough question because I know Sonic and Knuckles, they're all on there already, and so is Vector Man. I would include Streets of Rage for sure. I would even put the Lion King back on there because I did enjoy that game. And there was a Road Rash is another good one I'd put on there because there's a lot of like classic games that are just kind of missing from this. I know they had, I'm trying to remember, like it's been so long since I played these games. I don't remember what is out there. I know there was some form of Centipede that I remember being fun on there. Other than that, there's a ninja game also that I remember spending hours, but I don't remember what it was called. I'll have to look that up. But
Shinobi?
I think that was it. You're a ninja is a side scroller ninja game. Okay, that was it. That's it. Yep.
There was, to me, their Disney Aladdin. That was a very good one as well. Like I said, the Shinobi series, Altered Beast was really cool. Shining Force. There was also the Contra Hard Corps was
Primal Rage, right? That was on Sega originally, and Rampage also was on Sega, wasn't it?
yeah. And like I said, also as well, just because of how monumental it was, Madden, Golden Axe was also on there. You know, those were quality Sega games in the arcades at that point in time. So they were, you know, faithfully recreated on that platform. And there's just so many different games that actually came out on the Genesis that would have been awesome. I would have rather taken 60, 75 quality Genesis games that were actually fondly remembered by everyone, as opposed to these add-ons, some of which didn't even appear, again, like I said, on the Genesis platform, and that were maybe around that time or a little bit newer, and then also the junkware that was added on just to try and, you know, beef up the number of titles. That was, to me, is disappointing. So when, let's put it this way, when GameSpot tells you, not just in the article, but when they actually title the article, don't buy this console, which I've never seen before in my entire life, that a major publication in gaming has actually said that about a product. They've given a product bad reviews, 2s, 3s, what have you, but I've never seen the actual title of it say, hey, don't buy this at all. Hey, don't buy this at all. That really tells me something about how bad a system this is going to turn out to be for when it finally comes out to everyone else and makes it available. And there's just looks like a cash in by At Games, which is disappointing because they really had a chance to make something special that is going to be wanted 3, 6, 9 months down the line, just like the NES system, correct?
Right, and I know we're trying to cash in on the whole nostalgia thing, but let me ask you this: do you think there was actually a desire for a Sega Genesis remake or an Atari remake? Because there's so many of them. Like At Games, like they have produced so many of these similar consoles in the past, and like if you don't want assuming you still have all your games, like you can go out and buy the original console, say like a book off or something for, you know, 10, 15 bucks. So it's not like the only incentive I can think would be for the games already on them. But if you can, you know, scour eBay or Retro City Games or another retailer like that, you could probably pretty easily find what you're looking for without paying like $60, $70.
Well, it's also the fact that this NES system has renewed the interest. Now, when we say the Atari Flashback 8 and a new Sega Genesis flashback systems, At Games has been doing this for a while. So this is the 8th version of that, in case of Atari, that type of console. So they've been out. You and I both have seen it when you go out to local retailers and you've seen them out, and most of them are collecting dust or at a cheap price, $40, $50. They're beefing up the price at this point in time because they're banking on that nostalgia that has been reborn because the NES Mini. I think there is a market for it if it had a line of 60 quality games on it. That's all you need, 60 to maybe 100 in the case of the Atari, but for the Sega Genesis, 60 games would have done it, I think, that are all really good titles, because the Genesis had a dearth of good scoring, highly reviewed games. Mutant League Football is another one I didn't even mention. That's obviously a very good one as well. So those games were made available for the Genesis system. They're out there. It's just a matter of going and getting the rights to them and actually caring about, do you want this to last, or do you want to just bring out another version of it next year and the next year after that and the next year after that, and it sells for maybe a month or so before it just becomes dust on the shelves?
That's what we're going to get, because like, if you go to like Staples, every Christmas they have an end cap with Atari and Sega Genesis flashback consoles by At Games. So I think and I want to see Sega actually step up and make a retro console that we would probably be more into playing. That it would be there.
I agree.
There would be that standard of quality there.
I definitely agree with that. That's actually an excellent point. They should step up and do that. I'm sure they could find a hardware manufacturer that would comply and you know take a back step just to make sure Sega is firmly implanted and that's an official Sega product. I couldn't agree with you more on that. That should be the way to go because we've seen this before, and these latest versions from at games have just sat there on the shelves and not really garnered that much interest after a month or two. And this one has become a little bit more hype because of the obviously the advance that NES and the Super NES Mini have and will do. I just see it from a standpoint as well, similar to what happened a few years ago when everybody wanted to make their own Android and make their own Android gaming console. I know you remember fondly as far as that's concerned. A few years ago, maybe 3 or 4, I went to CES when there's like over a dozen different Android console makers in the works, and then by the next year, they were all gone. Nobody wanted to touch them because nobody wanted to buy them, and just they were all just poorly received and poorly executed as far as marketing to an entire audience. And I see the same thing happening as well, especially with the bad reviews for the At Games Genesis system. So it's very sad indeed. And like you said, until Sega actually decides to go ahead and take the plunge and do it on their own, I see this problem continuing because people wanting to cash in the same way Nintendo has cashed in on nostalgia. What are your thoughts out there, everyone, on the Sega Flashback and also as well the Atari Flashback system? Let us know your thoughts, popculturecosmos at yahoo.com. Also as well, Humanican Media, Pop Culture Cosmos, and Game Source on Facebook and Twitter as well. So Josh, any last thoughts on the way out as we head on into another awesome week with, like you said, The Dark Tower coming very soon to audiences?
Yeah, I'm hoping to catch The Dark Tower sometime this week. I'm excited to watch it. Before you go see it, though, I would definitely recommend. Actually, there's probably no time for you, but I would definitely recommend somewhere down the line read the books. You won't regret it, especially if you're a Stephen King and you're a Stephen King fan. But yeah, that pretty much covers everything.
So that's awesome to hear. Check it out, Dark Tower. And then also as well, Dark Tower, the movie coming up this weekend, which will preview a little bit more coming up on the PCC Multiverse this Friday on the Podcast Radio Network, and a plethora of downloading and streaming options. So for Josh Pederson, this is Gerald Glassford. It's another beautiful day here in the Pop Culture Cosmos. We thank you for listening. And here's hoping you have yourself a great day.